we will ask your questions for you. So if you do have any questions, please type them in online in the box on the right-hand side where it says questions. Please put them there, or some of you will email me if you have questions, and I will make sure that we get those answered for you. There's a lot of information to go through here, and we want to make sure we get to cover all of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Borst. She and Greg Stankiewicz are from New Jersey Community Schools Coalition. They will be doing the presentation today, and I know there's a lot of great information here, so sit back and enjoy. Julie, it's yours.
Great, thank you, Sharon. Hello, everybody. Greg and I want to thank you for having us to discuss community schools. We are the co-coordinators for the New Jersey Community School Coalition. We are it is Save Our Schools New Jersey ASA, PSA, Mercer Street Friends, Healthy Schools Now, NJEA, and we have begun to meet over the last year and a half to discuss community schools in New Jersey. As some of you may be familiar, there are community schools in some of our urban districts, and we were actually asked to do a scan of New Jersey, which we'll get into a little bit later, to find out where else and what else is going on in the state of New Jersey. The New Jersey Community Schools Coalition is also part of a national group called the Coalition for Community Schools, which is inside the Institute for Educational Learning in Washington, D.C. New Jersey has been identified as an emerging coalition, and that fortunately has gotten us access to about 24 states who are already doing some form of this work. In the case of the state like New York, they've been doing this work for about 25 years, and other ones like New Jersey have been doing it in a less methodical way for the last few years, and we'll get into some of those things. So the biggest question really is, what is a community school? And a community school is actually a strategy, and we think that approaching it like this instead of calling it a program kind of lends itself to how you think about how you leverage what happens inside your own community and how you can use a literal school building as your hub for all of those things. And what's unique about it is community schools are begun by taking an inventory of what your student needs are, what their family needs are, what your community needs are, and you go out into your community, you see what's available there, and of course there are national organizations that do this, there are state level organizations that do this, nonprofits, businesses, hospital groups, and things like that to provide all sorts of services through the school. And it's basically just a set of partnerships to lift up what is happening in your immediate area. And the really nice thing about a community school model, whichever one seems to fit where you are, is that they're all grassroots. This is a bottom-up approach. This is not Trenton saying, oh, well, we're going to make everybody community school and drop a model on top of you. This is literally looking at a micro level of what is happening where you are and meeting those needs.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Greg Stankiewicz. So what we have up here now on the screen is just a schematic, one schematic from our national partner, the Coalition for Community Schools and the Institute for Educational Leadership, as to how the leadership structure of a community school model is so collaborative. And the reason we like this chart and the reason we wanted to share it with you today was that it emphasizes, number one, that a lot of it is driven by the needs of students as students from the school. But the second part of it is the need of the community around that school. And that includes community and faith-based agencies, nonprofit organizations, but other partners as well. And then the two come together with that third part of the triangle, which is the leadership that comes from the middle there. And for us, and we'll talk about this later on, it emphasizes the importance of communities, community school coordinators who are actually, and as Julie said, in the school itself and understanding the needs of the community. So later on, when we have a proposal and we talk about the importance of community school coordinators, we talk about how we'd like to see them being drawn from the community itself, understanding the needs of the community, but being the type of go-between to bring together what for some people is a large school bureaucracy, as well as the different partners in the community, and to really create a hub around which a community can be strengthened. And that's why we're so excited, actually, talking to all of you today, because we really see sort of a real place there for increased partnerships, for a more holistic approach to helping not just schools, but communities around those schools. Why are community schools important? We think, number one, we see this as a vehicle for equity. And we find that a lot of the public supports items like after-school programs, mental health services, lots of other items that can be added on an ad hoc basis. But the number one issue that we believe is facing not just our schools, but our communities, is the barrier of poverty. And so for us, this strategy, rather than a program, it's a strategy, a bottom-up strategy of trying to overcome issues that schools, public schools, are facing in terms of poverty. We know nationally that right now, over half of our nation's students are low income. Just a couple of days ago, there was a new study that came out that showed that half of the babies now born here in the United States are at risk of malnourishment. So these are issues that all of you face every day as you look to try to make your communities better across our state. And we believe there's a convergence here. And so that is our approach to why we believe community schools are important. And there's a lot of different types of services that can be identified by community leaders and residents and families and students and teachers that get at what is facing each different community. But it includes things like chronic absenteeism. It includes things like health and mental health. And it's just a way of trying to provide it in a more holistic approach that works with the resources that are out there in our communities and on our state level, and for us as well is bringing in resources from the national level. So as you can see, we highlighted community-based organizations as we believe being a very, very important part of it. And here in New Jersey, we already have community schools set up in a number of districts who have been working very closely with some really great community organizations. So we can leverage that knowledge going forward. The next slide is thanks to our national partner, and it's a logic model. And we thought it'd be really interesting for all of you to take a look at this. And it's a model that's focused very much on community schools as a way to increase the educational opportunities for students of all types, including students who are facing a lot of issues of poverty. But the impact is trying to get students ready to graduate, not only for college careers and citizenship, but just for meaningful lives. But in my mind, this model is very strong, very good. I think it can be even broadened. And in my mind, the broadening here is to place this as a vehicle of helping place-based strategy. So that is one of the reasons why we're so excited about talking with all of you today. And some of the benefits of community schools on an educational level is in places where this strategy has been followed. Numerous studies have shown that, as you can imagine, because all of you do this every day, when you bring in a number of different services and bring it in an intentional manner, put it together, and do it as effectively and efficiently as possible, you get improved outcomes. And there's some really strong studies that show really good preliminary data that shows that you can use it to help close achievement gap, and through things like integrated supports, extended school days, and you also get better student outcomes through engaging not only the students themselves, but their families and the community around them. And very, very briefly, because we'll come back to this later on as well, but we wanted to give you a sense of the different types of community school models that exist across the United States and here in New Jersey. So there's one model is led by a nonprofit, and an example of that is in Trenton with the great work that Mercer Street Friends is doing with 2 community schools in Trenton. Patterson has 5 community schools working through the Patterson Education Fund. And then there are examples from other places in the United States. A second model that, again, we have a very good example of here in New Jersey is university assisted, leveraging the resources of a university. Montclair State University has been working with the Orange Community School Initiative, and that includes work with nonprofits and network members like HANDS for a number of years now. And as part of the resources that they can bring in is their partnership as well with the University of Pennsylvania Netter Center. So that's a second model that's also been very, very successful in many places in the U.S. A third is one that is initiated by the district itself. And here in New Jersey, we have a really good example of in Newton, New Jersey, which is a little bit different from the model that you usually think of an inner city district. This is a district in Sussex County with a superintendent very committed to the model, who learned about the model because of the graduate work he had done out in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. And so took some of the models there and thought that he's facing a situation where the student population in Newton is growing and becoming much more Latino and poorer. So the percentage of students coming from families who qualify for free and reduced lunch has been going up fairly dramatically in the last 10 years. And so for him, this is a model, a way of trying to provide better, more integrated services from some of the nonprofit organizations and other small businesses in their own community to try to overcome some of the obstacles that these students are facing. And then we listed 2 other models that are less popular here in New Jersey, but we wanted to highlight those as well. A joint powers agreement and a teacher-led model.
Right. I just want to add to one of the things that the superintendent in Newton has been able to do, because it is the seat of Sussex County, he also has all of the local agencies are literally right down the street from him. So he's had access in a way that maybe some other people have not, but he's a really great example of the community school model outside of the urban areas. And we are seeing them, and you'll see a map of this in a little bit, that demonstrates that community schools are in urban, suburban, and rural areas.
And that's a really good point, and sort of speaks to the increased suburbanization of poverty that we're seeing in New Jersey, and that Brookings Institution has been pointing out for a while now. We see nationwide as well. So this is a model, or a series of models and strategies that, as Julie said, can be effective for whatever community we're looking at, whether urban or suburban or rural. And then finally, we wanted to just give you a quick sense of right now, in this wave of community schools across the country, the locations of some of these efforts underway. And that there's been an increase in interest in this model over the last 10 years. And then finally, we just wanted to highlight that we do have already models to draw from here in New Jersey, and some of the oldest efforts underway rely on funding from the JP Morgan Chase Foundation and federal funding. through the Full Service Community School Grant Program. And so we highlighted 3 here. Patterson started in 2010, Orange in 2008, and Trenton in 2015. In Patterson, it's a model that works with the lead agency, the Patterson Education Fund, in 5 schools. In Orange, it's a university-assisted model, working with the lead agency of Montclair State University, their Center for Civic Engagement. But as I said, it's working with a lot of nonprofits there, including HANDS. And in Trenton, it's been a more recent effort underway, started in 2015, that works with Mercer Street Friends and a lot of other nonprofit agencies as well. We think there's a lot to learn from these efforts, but we also are worried that in terms of federal funding, it might not be as conducive an environment anymore as it had been. And so that's why later on we'll talk about an initiative that we're sponsoring, which is to try to get different sources of funding as a pilot here in New Jersey, because we just don't believe that federal funding can be relied upon, though people are still applying through other pots of money.
Right. I also want to add too, for the federally funded community schools, that those federal grants are 5 years. And once you have had one in a school, you may not reapply for it. So the hope has been is that that 5-year period would be enough to get the community school going, and then hopefully have a sustainability plan going forward for when you lose those federal dollars. In Patterson, the first school is now outside of the federal grants, and the building partner, which I believe was Boys and Girls Club of New Jersey, did not want it to stop being a community school, and they have pretty much kept that afloat. So the federal funding, while it's great to get it going, you really do have to have sustainability in mind as you are entering into this, because, like as I said, you couldn't go back and ask for more. You could ask for a new school, a district can apply for another school, but the same school building cannot reapply.
And we just wanted to highlight some of the latest research. It includes research that actually ties into the latest federal requirements under the Every Child Succeeds Act. It's this type of strategy. It's the type of strategy that's seen as a school improvement strategy, and that's another reason why we see this as a type of approach that can really target equity issues. And then just really briefly, in 2013, and there have been a few other studies as well, looking at social return on investments into the community school model. And the Children's Aid Society, which has been a wonderful driver for 40 years now of the community school model, and has done a tremendous amount, not just in New York, but also nationwide. In a study of one of their efforts, they found a social return of between $10 and almost $15 for every dollar in terms of social value.
And I'd just like to add too that we also know that the community school model also helps with absenteeism, and the state of New Jersey has chosen that as their extra identifier in our state ESSA plans. So we know that this also helps contribute to that. Okay, going forward. So what's happening here in New Jersey? We were asked by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to do a scan of New Jersey and see what is happening with the community school model, and are there places where this is happening that we didn't know about previously. So we had sent out surveys in July and September of 2017, and we had the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association and the Superintendents Association helped get a survey out for that. And we had a, whoops, did we lose? Okay, I'm sorry, here we go. So the survey of superintendents, we had a great response to it. We hit about 550 districts, and we heard back from 51. 14 of them were self-identifying themselves as community schools, so that was nice to see. But it was also interesting to see who said, no, we're not a community school, but then they went on to list all of the services that they are providing that are outside of the normal school day, as well as their partnerships either in the local community or with local nonprofits or with large nonprofits. And you'll see some of the breakdown of what's happening with those partnerships. Now, this map is kind of interesting. So this map shows every district that responded. The blue tags show who said no, but they're actually doing the work. The red tags are ones who self-identify, and the green tags, and this was really interesting because another hat that I wear is I'm a special education advocate, and 2 of the schools actually were using the community school model to help address issues with their students with disabilities. So I was happy to see that they were kind of thinking outside the box here. Now, what's great about this picture is it shows you very clearly that community school style work is happening from one end of the state to the other, and again, in rural, urban, and suburban areas in New Jersey. So this chart, as I can pull it up, approximately, okay, so we wanted to know how many partnerships was any school district having with anybody. And we were really glad to see that the biggest number were in the 3 to 5 range. So this could be anything from having a partner provide before or after care. It could be somebody who in the community who teaches music and they're doing music lessons after school. This could be you know, your local eye doctor doing eye exams annually. It could be just a myriad things. So it's good to see that these partnerships are happening, and it's not just onesie-twosie things happening all over the state. The next slide is who they're doing their partnerships with. And it's interesting to see that parents or community members was the largest respondent there. I think it was interesting to see that. But also note that large nonprofits and foundations, local governments, the university, hospitals, other kinds of healthcare, local businesses, those are all part of the mix. And we do know, because Greg and I did spend a fair amount of time speaking with individual superintendents about what they were doing. And we were really interested in the ones who were not calling themselves a community school, but are doing this work. And what we found was that they're choosing the low-hanging fruit. They know very glaringly immediately what's going on in their schools and with their students and what they can do. And so they've gone outside of school to go make these kinds of partnerships to address those things. But very few of them have had an opportunity to do a full, in-depth needs assessment of their community. And so in this slide, you can see the kinds of partnerships that they're creating, and the largest one is after-school programming. And this, again, is really not a surprise. You know, even in the wealthier districts, it's not unusual for mom and dad to both be working full-time. And in the less wealthier districts, it's not unusual for mom and or dad to be working more than one job. So they need these things. The second one is really interesting, the job development and trade internships. And this is something in New Jersey we've kind of gotten away from over the last 8 or 9 years of not really having strong trade training, either for our students while they're in high school or when they're outside. So it's nice to see some of those relationships happening organically, and hopefully those things can be supplemented. You also see that nutrition is on there. Greg was talking about the suburbanization of poverty, and I think this chart shows very nicely, you know, where their focus is, and mostly these are the easiest things, the most glaring things for them to take care of. The next one is, you know, what made it difficult for a superintendent to go out and make these partnerships? And you're going to see that lack of funding is the biggest issue. And the other piece of this too was time. So we usually use the superintendent in Newton because you know, Ken's been really great to us in talking about this thing, but he is spending a fair chunk of his time coming up with these partnerships. And that's not really what we want our superintendents to do. They have an awful lot to do these days. And so we don't necessarily want them spending their time doing these things. And you'll see lack of staff capacity is on there as well. So our findings, And I think Greg's going to
Sure.
talk about this.
Mm-hmm. So we thought that the survey results was helpful just to get a sense of the interest out there, but we also had a number of findings in our report that we wanted to highlight. Number one, Julie already covered that school districts already rely on partnerships, the majority reporting 3 or more partnerships. So this is not something that is new to districts. There's already a need out there, and this is a way of organically reaching out to try to work with representatives of the community to try to meet some of the needs that our districts and their students are facing. The second thing that came out very clearly in some of the interviews we had post the survey was, and again, this is nothing surprising, but the New Jersey school districts are facing a tremendous financial squeeze. There's been an underfunding of the school funding formula to the tune of almost $10 billion over the last 8 years or so, or 9 years. So it makes it that much, and on top of that, our school districts are operating under a 2% operating cap on their operating budgets. So for those districts who are facing a student population that's becoming poorer, that is facing more obstacles, it's getting harder and harder to be able to try to provide the services that their students need. And so this again is driving this sort of outreach to partners who might be able to help out. Third, and this is something again that correlates very, very closely to all the issues that you as members have to face. As school populations become more diverse and poorer, the research tells us, and we know this for a fact, that the cost to serve these populations are increasing. So here in New Jersey, you have this financial squeeze with an increase in the type of needs for services because our students are poorer. Fourth, is something that Julie highlighted as well, which is when we look at students that have different types of needs for different types of services, one of the things that many school districts are looking for are ways of delivering better services for their special needs students. And that again comes back in part due to looking for good services, and in part as well, the increased financial pressure that the districts find themselves under as they try to meet these needs. But what was also interesting in not just our survey, but in the interviews we had after the survey, is something that came up very organically through almost all the different superintendents we talked with, which is a need for many other services, including mental health services and healthcare services. And so here where I am in Mercer County, last month, all the superintendents across all the school districts in Mercer County issued a joint call for action. Here in Mercer County, we've had at least 7 student suicides in the last 20 months. And so the superintendents together as a group wanted to highlight the need for greater mental health services for our students, and they issued this joint call. It's something that they're going to be working on, and it's not just Mercer County. Mercer County was the 3rd highest, but this is an issue that is an ongoing issue that's gotten worse over the last 10 years for almost every one of our counties here in New Jersey, and this is something that's a national issue. And so we had numerous superintendents say, we need more resources, we need more help, we need to align with organizations that can provide the type of services that right now, even if we identify students who may need those services, it takes us a while to get those students to those services. And then I would even broaden it further, because one of the things that a community school model will allow you to do is say, not just for the students, but for their families as well. And finally, and this is a much more prosaic thing, but we found that superintendents acknowledging that even when they are proactive and try to establish partnerships, it is very hard for them, for funding reasons, for not having enough bandwidth within the districts, to undertake a formal needs assessment. And for us, that's a vital part of the community school model. And that goes back to the chart that we showed earlier on, that you really need to, if you're going to approach things in a holistic, integrated manner, to really understand what the needs are, not just for your teachers and your staff, not just for your students, but for your surrounding community. And there are very, very good needs assessment tools that have already been developed by organizations here in New Jersey, by organizations in New York, and other national organizations that are willing to share it. So there's no reason to have a district having to reinvent the wheel when it comes to mechanisms like that. And one of the things we wanted to identify is that these needs assessment tools already exist and can really help. And this goes back to, again, a lot of the work that a lot of you are doing in terms of how to do a place-based strategy that looks at issues that cut across a number of different neighborhoods, or how to collaborate to better identify what the needs are of a community. And that's why, as well, we see the parallels.
Right. So we want people to understand how the community school model can help meet all of those needs. And Greg has just touched on a bunch of these things, but it's really important to understand that a systematic method of needs assessments is critical to really be able to support your students and their families and your communities in the best, most efficient way possible. And we cannot stress that enough. You know, we're obviously thrilled that superintendents have been taking it upon themselves to start to create these partnerships, but kind of just going for the low-hanging fruit doesn't necessarily get them everything that they need for their students. So nonprofits like United Way are already in this space doing that kind of work. The needs identified are hyper-local, and that's something to celebrate. I know that a lot of policy these days is looking at things really from the 30,000-foot view, and this is not that. This is absolutely on the ground, what is happening to, you know, your town, your district, in that school, what's happening with their parents, what's happening with their grandparents who may live down the street. And also how you start to leverage and bring in those people. You never know what kind of talent you have in your neighborhood until you've gone out and knocked on doors. And Greg touched on, you know, the need for site coordinators. And to us, this is really the key in New Jersey. You know, because of being underfunded for so long, and what that has meant just year after year. And so our school districts, you know, administrative staff is cut to bare bones. They literally don't have the time to go make these partnerships, and nor should that necessarily be part of their job description. And a site coordinator is a dedicated person who does nothing but manage those needs assessments, you know, and going out and finding those partnerships within their districts, whether it's hyper local or state level. And that's the person who's really responsible for creating sustainability. And this is not necessarily a person who is an employee of the district. We know that it's too easy for somebody to get pulled in to be, you know, the lunchroom aide that day, or a teacher calls in sick and they, you know, whatever. So you need a person who is dedicated to doing this job, and they need to be trained well. And in the best case scenario, it is somebody from that community who already knows and understands what it's like to be there.
And just to jump in on that as well, the New Jersey Community Schools Coalition has been coalescing around an idea about a pilot program that we are now actively looking for support at with our state legislature and with the new administration. And so we're coalescing around a pilot program that would be involving 50 schools over the next 5 years, but it would involve exactly what Julie is talking about, which is a real focus on funding for a community schools coordinator in each of these 50 schools, rolled out over a period of 3 years to allow for a couple of years, at least a year of training in advance, and then a couple of years at least of implementation. The idea here as well is that whoever manages this would also manage professional development, not just for the schools involved, but for any district in New Jersey who might be interested in this model, because we believe that's really, really important. And so for a district who may be interested in the future of identifying one or more schools to be a community school, they would have the opportunity for free training for their staff to better understand the different models that we've talked about, the different approaches, but the importance for integrated, holistic approaches to the type of issues that may be identified. The other thing that we wanted to do as well is, and is within our this proposal, would be an evaluation of this pilot project. So the evaluation we'd like to see coming from an independent, university or a research organization that would really give all of us a better sense as to the benefits and the costs, the problems of implementation, and the promise of these models for New Jersey, with the idea being that for scalability, basically, that as Julie was talking about, there's a sustainability issue and a scalability issue, and we'd like to see this approach being brought to scale. And part of that as well is not just reaching out for state funding, but also reaching out to the nonprofit and philanthropic community to see about possible support from there as well for aspects of this, and working with agencies, community agencies, and community organizations. So this is just a quick sense of that, and then that flows into the next slide, which is our vision of community schools as a component of a place-based strategy. And I think that a lot of our partners already at the New Jersey Community School Coalition are approaching community schools in this vein. But the way we keep on hearing about this and the way we see it is that this sort of place-based strategy utilizes our public schools, a core institution that already exists in every single one of our communities, and we want to leverage it. And some of this is actually going back to the original conception that John Dewey had of the importance of public schools for our communities as a way of strengthening our citizens, as a way of serving as the core institution, one of the core institutions around which a community can thrive and strengthen. So we see this as a way of trying to inject an equity strategy that can target the most vulnerable students and families and communities here in New Jersey. But we also see it with the using partnerships as a way to break down silos. And many of you are already doing that so well in so many of our communities. So we see this as a way of adding to that, as a potential piece of a broader based strategy, targeting the type of communities that so many of you are doing such great work in already. The other thing we wanted to highlight is when we talk about this, we're talking about this as a strategy, not just for district schools, but charter schools as well. And so one of the things was that back in 2016, Marty Blank from our national coalition wrote a piece that I thought was very strong and very influential in Shelterforce. And the article was called "The Place-Based Charter School." And it wasn't even an argument. It was actually an invitation to charter schools who may not be as involved in the surrounding neighborhood as other charter and district schools are, to consider a community school strategy as a way to better integrate the work that they're doing within the surrounding community and not be as cut off from the surrounding community. And I would say that this is also in many places an issue that many district schools have to contend with as well, that there has been sort of over the years a wariness of working with schools in general and school bureaucracies, and especially in many of our communities where we have more populations that may be immigrant populations and don't have the resources to feel as comfortable in navigating the bureaucracy of a district or to understand about how a charter school works. this is a way of trying to bring down and pull down some of these barriers and better integrate the community with these institutions. And so it comes back to the tag that we keep on hearing from so many of our partners in the coalition, that we want stronger hubs for communities, and we want residents of these communities to have a greater voice in identifying what the issues are and how best all the different institutions working together can tackle some of these obstacles.
Right. And finally, what we would love is to hear from all of you. So are there efforts that you're engaged in that we should know about? And would it be useful to focus on specific efforts already that are happening that you perhaps already know about in the inner cities in Orange and Patterson and Trenton and Newark? And can we partner and learn from each other going forward? We would definitely be interested in having further conversations. Would it be helpful to have a roundtable so we can sit across from each other and learn from each other this way? Greg and I definitely welcome the opportunity to do that.
And, here's our contact information. You can reach either of us, both of us. Feel free to reach out at any time. We would love to get feedback from you. We'd love to hear any questions or comments right now. And we'd love to continue this discussion because we really believe that this is a fruitful area where we can deepen the partnerships between the organizations that are already doing such great work, and together we can do even better work. And
That's
so
terrific.
thanks, Sharon.
I was just going to jump in. I do have a bunch of questions here for you. I think you may have touched on some, but looking for a little more clarification on a few of them. One in particular is you talked about how when the survey was done of the superintendents, you noticed that there were 3 to 5 other services being provided. And so basically they become a community school. So what is the guide there? What is the level that has to be achieved to be considered a community school?
Actually, there isn't. People are choosing to call themselves community schools, and other ones are not. They're just doing the work. And I think in some cases they aren't calling themselves that because they're not actually familiar with the community school model. I mean, it's truly in those cases, it's extremely organic. They have a problem and they have to solve it. And so, and the way to solve whatever those particular needs are to go out into the community or to talk to nonprofits or other organizations. There is not a checkoff list for what makes you a community school or the ability to call yourself that.
I almost want to say shame on you to the schools that aren't doing that.
Right. I know some of them look at it as more work. But again, this is the reason why you have a site coordinator. This is the person who is going to be doing all of that legwork and maintaining those relationships and building them or changing them, adjusting them to whatever the population is in your school. I mean, one of the things that's happened so glaringly in the last 10 years, the change of what the populations look like in New Jersey. And to have those external forces of not having the money these districts should have had over the last 8 or 9 years, and the inability to raise that money if in fact you are a district who could raise that money. And we have school districts who have grown exponentially and are still receiving the same amount of funding as they did 10 years ago. So you can imagine what all these external forces are on these school districts. So yeah, so it's a very interesting strategy and has been very successful in lots of different places all over the United States.
And one of the reasons why, I'm sorry to cut you off, Sharon,
okay.
But one of the reasons why
Greg.
we're excited about the fact that the coalition is interested in a pilot strategy to try to bring in and increase the awareness across school districts of the resources already available, because we don't want districts to have to do this in a piecemeal fashion. It can be much more effective and efficient if we already leverage the organizations that already have tools at their disposal, have training at the disposal, and give districts the chance at having, you know, a strong training in the best practices throughout the country, so that, you know, we can really sort of use this strategy more effectively and not have to reinvent the wheel every time a district sort of tries to think about building up from the partnerships it already has. And so that is where we see the opportunity here to work with people doing community development and strengthening it, because we know that, you know, there are great organizations that are already looking at, like, for example, school health clinics. You know, so if we can sort of better leverage that and bring people in, so that any other district across the state who may have that need will already have a jump start into thinking who they might be able to work with, what partners are out there who are available, who can help in that, with that sort of need, or the mental health, which is such a crying need right now for so many of our communities. So it's just in a way trying to more effectively utilize so many resources that are already available to us here in New Jersey.
So Greg, with that, that leads to the question of, if we know that there are needs out there and the schools may not be presenting those needs, is there a coordinated effort, and I believe that would probably be through your organization or your board, to hear of the needs and then maybe identify some of the sources that are available and try to partner, you know, local organizations that are providing services with those districts? Is somebody like playing Match.com?
Right.
It really is. And one of the things that we've been doing, which we think is very helpful, is that our planning committee really is, it consists of individuals from designated organizations who are already providing, you know, services in this area from across the state. So the idea is exactly like you said, Sharon, sort of being able to match that and being able to rationalize that, so that there's no, so that people have a better sense of the menu of options out there, but also the menu of approaches out there. So for a district that might be in a more rural area of New Jersey, you know, they don't have to hunt to find out what else is happening, but they can sort of rely and learn from, you know, the approach that Mercer Street Friends takes in Trenton, for example, or the approach that so many different organizations that are doing great work in Patterson does, or that the United Way of Northern New Jersey has a really wonderful assessment tool that's used for social emotional learning, but that really parallels the type of needs that people who want to establish a community school are looking at as well. And so it can be used for that purpose. And they already have the capacity and the knowledge of how to do that effectively. And they only do it if there's an opportunity to come into a school and really listen to the voices, not only of the teaching staff, but also of the students. And we think that's exactly the type of ground up example of that really strengthens a community school approach.
So we've got a few more questions and only a few minutes, so I want to try and hit them. One in particular came from two different points of view, from two different people. So utilizing after school and summer programs and utilizing the buildings for those programs obviously would lead towards making it a community school. Are you or are the school districts utilizing the 21st Century Grant programs that fund those types of things and would pay for the coordinator to do that work?
Yes, that is currently happening. Actually, Orange would be a good example of that. And we keep, you know, cringing every time the federal budget comes up around because that is always in jeopardy. But yes, currently there are several districts utilizing those 21st Century grants. And yes, so Title IV money can also be used, and Title I money can be used to pay for site coordinators as well. It's just that obviously that with the lack of funding in New Jersey, those funds tend to get used up really quickly. And the Title IV money, I believe, is new this year. And it's not a lot of money. So part of the reason why we wanted to, or why we chose the site coordinators as a pilot, is because we think that's probably the biggest bang for the buck, for lack of a better way of putting it, just in terms of spending money to help districts learn and get off the ground.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with the 21st Century Grants and what's involved in putting them together, but just going through the process of building a 21st Century Grant would help you build a community school model within that community. Yeah. So you have to bring the people together and they state what their needs are and you have to find answers to that, but a great way to fund a coordinator. However, really difficult proposals to write. So unfortunately, you need somebody that's willing to put the time and the money in to write the proposal.
Exactly.
I'm trying to decide which way to go here with all the questions. So the other big one that came in, though, is are you working or are you recommending that the communities work with the community college? They're uniquely positioned to help their local communities, and they will share the info that they have. A lot of times they've already done assessment gaps or assessments of the community to know what to offer at the college and for some of the summer programs. And is that a recommendation to work with the community colleges?
Yes, actually, we have not formally put out a recommendation to do that, but yes, to that point, yes, and especially I think probably in the last 10 years, most of our community colleges have grown, not only in the number of buildings they have on their campuses, but what they're providing. And yes, we think so, very much so. And we also know too, through the university model, I mean, obviously not everybody's going to have access to a Rutgers or a Montclair, but every county's has a community college. So yes, that certainly could be done. And I would be very surprised to find any of the presidents not wanting to get involved in that way, because you're right, they do tend to be very involved. You know, they have their food banks and they have all these things. And by the way, they're also experiencing exactly the kinds of pressures from a poverty standpoint that the public schools have been dealing with as well.
Are you finding that as people are working on setting up a community schools program, that the school district wants to keep control, especially of whatever funding would come in?
Can I get some clarification about what you mean by that?
So if you're going to write for a grant for providing one of the services for the summer or whatever, does the school want to control the grant because of insurances and some money also to help offset the expense of running the program?
We have not seen, I mean, the district is always involved. I don't want to give the impression that having a site coordinator, that person is autonomous from the district, but they're not operating autonomously. So part of the training is also for senior administrators, so that they know not only the purpose, but how to use that person as well. So I think a district has to be hand in hand with this. This is not happening as a separate event. And by the way, the district is operating in parallel. That it is a partnership between the two, and there may very well.
We lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
There you are. We lost you for a minute.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that there may be districts who don't want to have this in their schools, but this is absolutely a partnership type of situation between a site coordinator and the school district administrators. This is not something that happens, in its own silo within a district. So
then that leads to a great point here. Since it has to be a partnership, how do community organizations or people in the community that want to work towards a community school, how do they go about starting that conversation? Who do they go to?
Well, I think our coalition is as broad-based as we possibly can be, and we're looking to increase it. But I think that one of the ideas behind setting up this coalition is exactly to be able to help sort of align different partnerships and provide information. So we'd be more than happy to let people know what already is happening in their region, in their communities, and if there's nothing happening, what the latest status is, you know, who else they can turn to. But that's also why we're so excited to be on this webinar today, in that we want to broaden the coalition even further, because we really believe that the strongest efforts are those, like you said, that you know, it's not controlled by the district. It's a real set of strong partnerships, and we believe in bringing as many people to the table, even down to the fact that I believe that in terms of creative ways of funding and financing some of these efforts, you know, we can use some of the better models and best practices that all of you know, and there are other pots of money that we might be able to bring in as well. So we're getting advice from national in terms of some of the federal funding, but we'd love to sort of broaden it even further and use, we have a convening that'll be coming up of our coalition probably in April or May. We would love to have people involved in that, and we have convenings twice a year, and we use that as an opportunity to bring people up to speed on what's been happening and what the opportunities are.
Right, and there's also too, I should just add, you know, if you're in a district and you see things happening and it doesn't look like the schools are doing it, the person to call would be the superintendent. That would be your first entree into a school district, and just ask for a meeting and sit down. And if there are things that you can offer that you think the district could utilize, you should absolutely be having that conversation. You know, and of course, we're always happy to help facilitate that as well. We know that the New Jersey Administrators and Supervisors Association, and that's the superintendents, their association is talking to them about community school models. They are aware of this. Just sending out the survey actually drummed up some very interesting responses from people who, oh, I had no idea, and isn't that really cool? And yeah, I want to learn more about it. So even just by putting out a survey, there's now at least a cursory understanding or awareness that this model exists.
And last question, because we're right up at the time here. Is there a marketing campaign for this, or is there some type of materials that could go out to different nonprofits that might be providing services, or to PTO, PTA groups to be aware, that would raise awareness and get people talking about it?
That's a excellent idea. We're working on having a stronger marketing campaign, building off of our efforts at our convenings, and we're also think there's an opportunity if our proposal for the pilot initiative here in New Jersey moves forward, not just to educate the legislators, but also to, as you said, to broaden the concept here in New Jersey. So we'd like to use that as the opportunity, but you know, we welcome suggestions and thoughts on that as well, because I think that's a great idea.
Terrific. So with that, we are right at the hour. We found this very informative, and obviously it raised a lot of questions, because we have a lot of questions here that I was asking you and trying to combine them. We really appreciate that you took the time to explain this and raise the issue with us of community schools, and this will be viewed, obviously, as I said, it'll be on our website. Very, very informative, very much appreciated. And I believe that we will obviously be involved with you as you are moving this forward and with some ideas, and we'd be happy to help. So thank you both, Julie and Greg. And we will, again, everyone that's listening or anyone that wants to play this back, it will be on our website for our members. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you,
We
everyone.
appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, everyone.
You do.